thanks very much for the invitation. I'm going to attempt to talk about this topic, which is what is a contemporary home in 2024. And this topic, really, we were approached by Simon to talk about it. We wrote a little article for Home Building and Renovating magazine back at the end of last year. We've got a long-standing relationship with Home Building and Renovating, where we write various articles. We take part in their judging for the Daily Telegraph Home Building Awards. We're going to attempt to talk about this topic, but really around some of the work that we've been doing, which aligns with our kind of relationship and work that we've been doing with Mesh as well, because Mesh are involved in some of these projects. So for those of you that don't know who we are, we're a tiny little micro architectural practice based here in Southampton. We're sort of a collective of architects, artists, and academics. And so the article that we wrote for Home Building at the end of...
Sorry, Darren, can I just interrupt for 1 second? Yeah. Do you reckon you could put it on slideshow by just underneath your
yes, sorry.
And then it's make it easier for people to see.
Yeah.
Marvelous. Okay? Thanks, Darren. Sorry to interrupt.
That's all right. So yeah, this little article that we wrote for Home Building last year was all about what is a contemporary house in the 21st century. And for us, it's that kind of ethical and moral question. How do you align by using less of Earth's resources, in the kind of developed world? And here we talked about the idea that so many self-builders out there are kind of making some informed decisions, morally significant decisions based on what they want to achieve. And I was just sort of chatting to Simon about that. And given that, so many of the sort of feed-in tariffs and the kind of push for renewables has kind of been removed by government, we feel that actually, private domestic clients are the people that are kind of really driving, the opportunity to continue to develop not only really interesting pieces of architecture, but actually using less materials, kind of using sustainable sources. And so I think there's still a really fantastic opportunity for all of us to be doing some great work. So we wrote the foreword to Mesh's book, I think probably maybe 4 years ago now. And I think Doug was really quite passionate about writing this little practical guide. Again, we are academics and teachers, so we take part in teaching at various universities. I teach at Reading University, and we talk a lot about activism with our students. And this young lady, Greta, has been, an incredible activist, kind of pushing, the idea of how we need to be kind of using less, but still doing what we need to do to kind of, bring about, interesting opportunities for ourselves. And yeah, we constantly are having the really interesting conversations with, first year architecture students about, activists. And some of our students actually go off to some of these, opportunities to go and, become activists. Interesting, ideas around where is the climate science going and how we need to be kind of acting on the data that we're seeing. And for us, it's really important for us to be working on existing buildings. We've only got one project, which I'll talk about a bit later, where we're doing a replacement home. But if you look at existing buildings and the kind of embodied significant CO2 emissions in materials, there's data that kind of points to the whole lifetime of existing buildings, and kind of early research and reports show that by not counting embodied carbon, we underestimate the entire carbon emissions of a new build up to 31%. And so if you compare to refurbishing a traditional Victorian terrace, a new building of the same size produces up to 13 times more embodied carbon. So for us, it's about kind of working with existing buildings and still being able to do really interesting architecture. We have lots of internal conversations here about the linear and the circular economy, and the fact that, the linear economy, really does end up with very quick disposal and incineration of materials, whereas, the circular economy, it's much more about reuse, reimagine, and, kind of using biomaterials. Interestingly, one of the things that we've been trying to adopt here is the response where the RIBA has looked at, climate change and what that looks like in terms of the kind of UK 2050 net zero. So we've been adopting the kind of UN Sustainable Development Goals on many of our projects now, particularly some of the church projects that we're working on. And it's quite interesting when you look at, if you take all 17, how do you apply those to buildings? Well, you might just kind of look at this as a response, which we're trying to do here in practice. And what those kind of outcomes might be in looking at using those with clients and on projects. So as a team here, we're really kind of trying to engage with this as much as possible. So how do you kind of look at that with projects? So one of the first private domestic projects that we took on 4 or 5 years ago was a listed house in Meonstoke in the Meon Valley.
What do you know?
Oh.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I'll sort that, don't worry.
This is a listed house right in the. Oh, somebody's.
I know.
Juliet, can you go on mute, please?
Sorry, I thought.
Thanks.
I thought I was getting heckled there, Simon. I didn't realise I was doing stand up.
Very controversial, Darren.
Yeah. So this is a listed house right in the high street in Meonstoke, and the current family here we're growing, just about to have their second child. So the challenge for us was how do you take a property like this and kind of extend. This is the rear garden, and they were asking us to kind of look at, how we might incorporate an annex and extend their dining space. You can see quite a constrained site, but also very historical. And so with every project, we kind of look at a whole series of options, and for us, it was about looking at some path. It was looking about, how we might kind of reconfigure the garage, and then presenting those as a series of options. So here we've got the existing listed house, and then we were pushed by the conservation officer to kind of go quite contemporary with this. We'd already kind of proposed something quite contemporary, and then sort of came up with this response, which was a contemporary extension for an annex with a zinc roof, but also kind of building on the local context with the brickwork. We built lots of models and kind of presented that to the local authority, and then came up with these visuals, which, as I said, the conservation officer pushed us to go even more contemporary. And then it was kind of, looking at the existing house and kind of borrowing from that in terms of the brickwork and the detailing. And the response was, a small little pavilion, which was the joining piece between, the old and the new. And then just kind of, how that sits within the context and not trying to damage the existing context. This is the family here. And you can see it's quite a tight site, and it was incredibly challenging with some of the neighbours here. But we hope that we've kind of set something that, sits reasonably comfortably within the context of Meonstoke. And then from that, we moved on to working with another family who just bought an old farm, a Victorian farm based near Reading, which was it was a collaboration with John Barclay, who's a local architect. John's sister bought this property, and we collaborated with John on this. So again, a very tired existing building, which we've done a complete retro on the existing building, where we've replaced all the windows, we've upgraded all the wall insulation, we took the roof off. It's got ground source heat pump. You can see some really lovely features. It's got triple glazed windows in now. This was the existing that we were met with about 4 years ago. And the initial ideas was we designed a single story response, and then we were about to put this in for planning, and the client decided that no, they wanted a 2-story response to this. So we withdrew the application, and then we worked with John, collaborated on producing this as a 2-story proposal. So timber frame extension to the existing. And so you can see we've used Internorm triple glazed windows in both the existing and the new build element. So this as a response is quite something, because with the ground source heat pump and the upgrade in the thermal fabric, there's huge amount of less load on this than there would be normally.
Darren, can I just interrupt again? Just
Yes.
Tobias is asking a question about this, well, the previous project, in terms of how did you do the upgrade of the wall insulation?
On this one, so this effectively was internal insulation. So rather than do anything with the cavities, we've done a complete insulation upgrade. So effectively, the insulation is internal, and then that wraps into the triple glaze internorm windows, so that there's a kind of a complete joined adjacency between windows, internal walls, because there's no point putting triple glazed windows into a situation and then the insulation is within the cavity, and then it's all then aligned with the roof insulation and floor insulation. So effectively, we've done a kind of a blanket within that kind of internal environment.
Cool. Tobias has just followed up in terms of what type, we might have just answered. Yeah, what insulation did you use?
It was a rigid Kingspan insulation.
Did you look at alternatives to Kingspan then?
Yes, we looked at all number of different insulations, and the reason that we went for Kingspan in the end was both the thickness of that insulation, because the thinner Kingspan insulations are going to give a higher U value, and also the cost of that. So that was the reason for choosing the Kingspan.
Yeah, it's a striking building. I don't know M&N. Sorry, I'm not whether M&N what it stands for, but they asked whether the new structure was SIPS.
No, it's a stick-built timber frame solution, and then it's got insulation within the studs. So essentially, what happened? This building was built within the pandemic. So one of the things that we had to do was we had to bring all the timber onto site as quick as possible, so that we weren't under restrictions within the pandemic. And then there were timber cassettes that were built actually within one of the old barns on the farm.
Thank you.
And then moving on to this property. So this is an old Colt timber frame house. Anybody out there that knows the company, the Colt timber frame company, they used to build chicken farms, and then in the 1950s, at the end of the Second World War, they then entered into the domestic house market. So this building was built with the same technology, and our clients bought this house just under 18 months ago in Twyford, just outside Winchester. A very, very tight budget, a family that were very keen on doing this as quick as possible, as Tom was being posted to Madrid for his first diplomatic post for the Foreign Office. So we had to get planning and deliver this in just over 12 months, which was quite a challenge. So we worked very closely with a local planning consultant. This is the interior, to try and maximize both the 30% that they were allowed. So we did a lot of modeling. You'll see this is the existing property where we kind of modeled what we had, and then it was a case of looking at how we might be able to take the roof off, put a new roof on, but also get rooms in the roof through dormers. So we had to look very carefully at how we might kind of configure dormers in this building. So we went through a whole process of kind of looking at the existing ground floor footprint. You'll see those were the extensions, and then kind of designing external colonnades to cut down on sun. There we're showing the roof extension as to what we were increasing on the height, and then the dormers. All the dormers are then angled. You'll see this so that they turn away from the neighbours. But at the same time, this was again doing a complete thermal upgrade and trying to create something of sort of architectural merit that the planners would buy into. So effectively, we kind of reconfigured the ground floor, and then we put a new roof on to get bedrooms in the roof. So you'll see here, these are the dormers that are kind of cut into the new roof. And then the idea was to completely reclad the outside of this building, keeping the existing timber frame there, upgrading all of the existing insulation in the walls. So we added mineral wool to the walls. We also then upgraded the floor, put a new roof on, and then there was air source heat pumps that we got planning for as well.
When you say, did you say plural, air source heat pumps, or?
So we got planning for 2. We've put 1 in. And at the moment, I'm not quite sure what the feedback is, because the clients have sort of moved to Madrid and they're renting this house for the time being. So it'll be interesting to find out how it's kind of performing.
And then do you, is there any post-occupancy evaluation ability with this one then, in terms of
Well, it'll be interesting to ask the question. I mean, I think, you know, the greatest challenge for architects is doing projects like this, and then you know, asking clients to, you know, buy into that as as whether we've got a fee to do it, or whether it's something that you don't have a fee, but you know, have to kind of monitor that. And I think it's a real challenge for us as architects at the moment to be able to get that feedback, but incredibly important. So these were the images in the model that we produced. You can see the dormers are all angled so they look away from the neighbours. And then this is the finished product, which was completed literally a week before Christmas. And then the client then flew out to Madrid on the 1st of January. So job done as far as we're concerned. We sort of moved on from there's Tom and Letty and one of their little ones. So these are the dormers that are sort of all angled away from the neighbours.
quite different to what it looked like before?
Very different to what it looked like before, yeah. This is a project that we have on site at the moment, and this is something that we've been working with Mesh on for probably about the last 18 months, 2 years. This is a house in Brockenhurst, where the clients bought this about 2 years ago, and it had these interesting sort of little appendages at the back that have been added over a number of years. And the client's challenge to us was that they wanted to do a complete thermal upgrade of the existing property, but they wanted an extension that sort of engaged with the garden, because they wanted a new kitchen. They're very, very passionate about their cooking and entertaining. So we kind of went through a process of looking at, you know, how we might be able to thermally upgrade this building, and Mesh have been fantastic in doing their own sort of feasibility work, which has been incredibly important to kind of feed back to the client. So as an example, this is some of the work that Mesh have been undertaking. So looking at the existing roof and then kind of how that sits with the new roof, existing walls with the new walls, and kind of looking at all the options. And I think what's fantastic about this is that it looks at what the cost of the materials are, what the cost of fuel is. You can see there's a column that looks at the kind of payback. And not only that, Mesh suggested that we did a permeability test before we actually started construction of this. So it's the first time that we've undertaken a test on an existing building before doing any work, and that's been great to kind of feed into, you know, what we're doing as a team. So for example, we kind of did a feasibility study in line with Mesh. So as we were kind of looking at design options, as we were kind of looking at extension. So this is the existing house, and then we've kind of looking at options to kind of extend at the back with a new kitchen, dining, living space. So lots of ideas about, you know, how we might kind of building shading once the extension's in place, but also looking at how we might upgrade the existing building. So we did a lot of SketchUp modeling to look at overheating and how we might negate that. So you'll see here, this is the proposal for the extension, and then we've got these sunshades at the back. We're also looking at recladding and insulating the existing building, put in triple glazed windows in the existing building, just like the Victorian farmhouse. And so really this is the key extension, which is creating this relationship to the garden. This is the rear space where we've got our little extension, and then the kind of relationship tying into some of the things that the client wants to do in the rear. We've got a new entrance canopy as well that sort of ties everything together. Again, building lots of models to convince the local parish council, which is always a bit of a challenge. This one was an easy one. It was the first time that the parish council had ever seen an architectural model brought to a parish council meeting, which got unanimous voting on our side. So this is us currently on site, and this image here is from the front door. So it was all about kind of looking through the existing house to get these views of the garden. This is an image here, which is from the dining space, again, looking all the way through into the new living kitchen dining space. And then this is the kind of key view out. So again, we're using internorm windows. That's Paul the builder from Task, who is a local builder based down in Christchurch, who's doing a fantastic job on site.
Do you help find the builders, or is that?
Yes, yeah, we've had to because it's just become more and more challenging with kind of tender and build costs, and we negotiated with Paul on this. There are certain things that Paul's doing, and then there are certain things that the client's doing. It's the only way we can kind of deliver these projects at the moment. So this is the extension from the back, and then we're going to be overcladding all of the existing cladding, upgrading the insulation. So again, we've got internorm windows going into the project. So
with just on that one, because I genuinely didn't ask you to come on and plug Mesh, but it's great that you've mentioned us. When it comes to the work that Mesh did with you, I mean, obviously the clients there, they have certain ideas of how they want to use that house, you know, the connection to the garden, etc. When it comes to sort of thermal upgrade work and the work you've done there around the insulation in cladding and you know, addressing any overheating, etc., and to even get the client to pay for the feasibility study as well, like is that something they were already interested in, or was that you leading that conversation?
I think they brought that question to the first meeting that they had with us. So they came through the RBA. So it's always interesting when you get a client that comes to the RBA client advisory service, because a client has clearly done their research and gone to the RBA and said, we need to find an architect. Mm-hmm. And so generally those clients are coming with quite a lot of knowledge themselves. They've probably done a lot of research. They may well have been to, you know, some of the trade shows that are out there. So it was a question they asked us at the first meeting, you know, how do we go about looking at a strategy for the whole project? And we said, well, ideally we go and appoint Mesh to do a feasibility study alongside us. And so what was great was that, you know, you guys were doing your work while we were doing the design work. So it wasn't that you get that sort of unfortunate situation where we've done a load of work, we might even gone in for planning, and then we come to you and say, right, how do we kind of look at some of these things? It was, you know, pretty much at the same time that we were starting our work. So it was great to kind of feed in, and, you know, the fact that we did the air test as well at the same time to test the existing structure so that we knew what we were doing. And, you know, it just dovetailed, you know, really quite well. Cool. And I know that I've got a colleague here at the moment that's talking to you about another project where we're trying to get some developers to buy in to do the same process. You know, I think with private domestic clients, it's much easier because, you know, they're kind of reading this stuff and you know, they're interested in it anyway. Yeah, definitely. And so this project is currently in for planning. As I mentioned, we've only got one replacement house at the moment. Again, another existing structure that is definitely sort of past its sell-by date, unfortunately. And so this client approached us to look at a site in the centre of the New Forest. Really fantastic plot, but a real challenge because it's a skinny plot. So this is the plot here, an absolute slither of a site. where this particular building has been added to. So you've got what would have been the existing main house, and then you've got this property that's grown out of a whole series of buildings that have been added to over the last 60 or 70 years. And this plot may well have been somebody who was staff to the main house. So this has been a real challenge for us, because it's been really important to kind of sympathetically sort of replace what's there. And the idea that the main thinking is that we are really keen to kind of deliver this as a cross-laminated timber solution that will sort of float across the landscape. And so we've taken essentially what is the kind of existing context and designed a house that what works in the existing skinny plot, but has a series of sort of mini courtyards, so that those courtyards kind of spill out. They bring the kind of natural landscape into the house. It gives us an opportunity to open out onto those courtyards and use them for natural shading and ventilation. And so again, we did lots of sort of SketchUp modeling to kind of look at what the options were on this site. And then we kind of produced a whole series of illustrations. So in reality, what we're trying to do is to kind of remove the existing building that's past its sell-by date and produce something that's very similar. So the idea is that we're kind of cladding the roof and the walls in all the same timber cladding, and then these little courtyards kind of form these breakout spaces between sort of living, dining, kitchen and bedrooms. It's been really quite challenging through planning. In fact, we haven't quite got there yet. We're about to go to planning committee in about 4 weeks' time. We've got major backing from the planning officer and conservation officer, but everybody else in the vicinity has been quite challenging. But that's the nature of the project, really. So you can see the context. That's how our building sits on this kind of long skinny plot, and then you've got the existing properties around. So quite interesting, because what we've been doing is trying to sell the idea that this is very contextual. We've sort of built lots of concept models just to kind of, you know, show the client. And the idea is that it's kind of drawing from the sort of natural agricultural aesthetic, which, as I say, the planners and conservation officer have bought into. But as far as some of the neighbours, they expect this to look very domestic and very traditional, which is.
So when you say they expect it to look, they're fearful that it's going to look that way, or
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Whereas our view is this is what we would sort of typically describe as contemporary vernacular, which is, you know, sort of drawing from the vernacular, but it's got a contemporary twist to it. So, you know, we've been working with a cross-laminated timber company, even at planning stage, to develop a system where it'll be cross-lam walls, cross-lam floor and roof. And the idea is that it will float on screw piles. Again, it's heavily conserved in terms of trees and planting. So the idea is that there won't be any sort of trench concrete foundations. There won't be any concrete slab. It'll be a structure that sits above the landscape.
Darren, do you mind if I just bring John in? He's got a question. John, did you want to come off mute?
Right, anyways, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Very good. My question really, Dan, is do you have any costings of these upgrades? As it would seem that such upgrading would almost be the same cost as the new build, especially with the VAT advantage, where you don't pay the VAT.
So we have these conversations, which I'm sure everybody on this call has with their clients, about VAT and upgrades. So, for example, the project near Reading, which was the Victorian farmhouse, the client had done their research, so they deliberately bought that property knowing that it had been empty for a period of time. And if a property is empty for, I think it's 2 or 3 years, then providing you have that proof with the local authority in terms of whether anybody's paid any council tax or not, you can rate the VAT down to 5%. So that the Victorian farmhouse project, which was a complete thermal upgrade of that building, the extension, the landscaping, and the renewables. We rated the VAT on that project down to 5% because it had been empty for whatever it was, 2 or 3 years. And the same on the Colt House timber frame project in Twyford. So that was rated down to 5% as well. So, you know, there are major challenges around reusing in existing buildings because yeah, you're paying VAT on those. And so the one in Brockenhurst that we've got on site at the moment, we've got full VAT on that at 20%, and we've had to scale back, you know, some of the things on that project, and the clients had to take some of those things on as well, because, you know, when a builder puts their overheads and profit prelims and markups on those things, that it becomes, you know, challenging. So, you know, the Victorian farmhouse project, you're looking at circa of £1 million for that in terms of the upgrade, the extension, the landscaping, all the renewables. The timber frame Colt House in Twyford, where we've done the upgrade and taken the roof off and put that back on, we managed to find a local builder that we negotiated with, and that's been delivered for about 350,000, that project. The Brockenhurst project, which is the extension and thermal upgrade, that's going to be around about 300,000. But again, you know, if we were bringing in a contractor to do everything, you know, I think it probably would be above clients' budgets on those. But interestingly, you know, for example, on the Reading project and on the Twyford project, both clients were absolutely adamant that they wanted internorm triple glazed windows. So because there's no point doing the thermal upgrade unless you're not using the best products on the market. So there is some trade-off against you know, some elements.
Thank you, Darren.
On this one, we don't have a current sort of costed budget on this one. We've gone out and got an approximate cost on the cross-laminated timber. This is about the 3rd or 4th iteration in terms of planning, which we're hoping we'll get approval in the next month. And the other last quick project I was going to just very briefly talk about is a project that we're just about to put in for planning. And again, it sort of sits comfortably with our philosophy about, you know, reuse and reimagining. So this is an old pottery in the centre of Whitchurch, where a client has approached us to attempt to get planning for a new house right in the centre of Whitchurch. But again, for us, it's really important to kind of reuse, reimagine, and try and draw from what's already here. So you'll see the current aesthetic. This is the external wall that greets you, which has got you know, a beautiful mix of flint and brickwork, and even sort of cut-ins for where Penny used her studio here to get light into her pottery studio. And what we've been doing is trying to draw from that into what we propose. In fact, we had a design review on Friday here in the studio, and we had somebody from the National Trust, who's a surveyor, as part of our design review panel. And he talked about a phrase called bungaroosh, which is apparently a real term, which is this type of construction, which is kind of added, and it's a sort of natural aesthetic that appears in, you know, certain parts of the South Downs National Park. So that was all new to us, but it's interesting because what we're trying to do is draw from what's here. And so what we've been looking at is replacing the pottery studio with a new home. So, you know, sort of examples of things we've done previously, but also, you know, really good contemporary examples of how you might produce something which is of a traditional form. And just that idea of taking you know, something that might be a ruin and then adding something to it. So again, you know, it's how you can, you know, use what's there to your advantage and then propose something that's much more contemporary.
What was good last week is when David was speaking, he was talking about how just trying to keep it in keeping, but also just he was using them to put in like nesting areas for birds and sort of insects. What do you call them? You know, like little insect houses, and just, it was quite cool. Just, I mean, just trying to use as much leftover material as possible within keeping within the design. It was cool.
Yeah, I mean, and that's exactly what we're trying to do here. So you'll see, you know, from that photograph I showed at the start, where you've got the existing brickwork and the openings, that's effectively what we're trying to do here. So it's to take what's there and then you add in your kind of contemporary sort of addition, but at the same time you're producing something that is thermally aligned with current building regs.
Yeah.
And I guess that's really, you know, what our passion is. You know, whether it's a house or whether it's a church, it's that kind of same aesthetic. So I think that's my last slide. So it's a bit of a quick run through, because I know you talked about sort of 30 to 35 minutes.
No. Well, we've had questions on the hoof as well, which well, hopefully you're okay with. I didn't ask you whether you wanted to take questions during or after, so apologies for that. But it's good to see the different types of contemporary houses that we can all live in and can look to design as well. So it's a really interesting presentation. Thank you. And also, it's just, they weren't all grand design houses as well. They're all very attainable. Well, they are, yeah, they are attainable. They're clearly very. The farmhouse with the extra building on the side was, yeah. People will be fortunate and lucky to be able to live in a house like that. But it's good to see the different breadth and the skinny site, as you called it. In fact, not that it's about me, but I found a plot in a village close to Exeter, and it was very, very similar to that plot. And my wife said, I cannot live in such a thin plot as that. And it was interesting to see how you sort of met that challenge. So I'm just seeing what Jill was writing. Where are some? Oh, were some of the properties built to passive house standards, or did you include elements of PH, like the triple glazing, etc.?
None of them are built to passive house standards. It's always a bit of a challenge to do that on existing buildings, but not totally impossible. I think, for example, on the Victorian farmhouse there, we got an opportunity to thermally upgrade the whole of the existing building, and then attempt to use things like the internal windows, and then we've got a ground source heat pump. So, you know, I think it's about using this kind of fabric first approach, really, where we upgrade the fabric, whether it's existing or whether we're able to, you know, do you know, as close to as possible. But to date we haven't had a project where we've either been asked or we've pushed to go passive house on any of this stuff. But as I said, I think it's really interesting where we've got clients who sort of, you know, they turn up and they dictate from day one that we are definitely going to have triple glazed windows, and we definitely want internal windows. And I think that's really good. It's really helpful where we've got clients that are kind of, you know, that's on their, it's on their wish list.
Yeah, cool. And just out of interest, I mean, it probably doesn't apply to you so much, but is from the planning authorities, are you coming across more and more asking for whole life carbon assessments now?
We haven't to date, no.
New builds so much. I don't suppose you're having to make that comparison, I suppose. No,
but I mean, I think, you know, for example, the house in Brockenhurst, when we presented to the parish council, the client came along and the client talked, you know, for about 4 or 5 minutes about what their passion was and what they wanted to do, and how they were going to have PV panels, how they were going to have an air source heat pump, how they were using triple glazed windows. And I think, you know, it's fantastic when you get a client that's so passionate about those. Those are things that are really important to them. And when they spoke at the parish council, the parish council sort of turned around and said, actually, what we should be doing is insisting on this is what's happening. I mean, they can't because there is no formal sort of legislative way of doing that. But, it went a long, long way to convincing the parish council that here was somebody that really wanted to invest in existing fabric.
Yeah, you'd hope that logically does have an influence. Kingsley's now getting all literal. He's now quoting Jonathan saying, "Build big houses, and if you can't build big houses, then build long houses." When I was going to say something. So we've seen examples of how you've addressed potential of overheating when it comes to sort of more the renewable tech side of things. Heat pumps. What heating systems are you using? Underfloor heating? Do you have any radiators going into these properties once you've sort of revamped them? Or are you using?
Yeah, so that's a really good question. I mean, for example, on the Victorian farmhouse, on the new build element, it was all underfloor heating. On the existing, we used underfloor heating on the ground floor, where we were able to kind of lift the floor, put trays in, re-insulate, get it in between the existing floor joists. On the first floor, we then put radiators in. So there is still a bit of a challenge and a mixture when you're dealing with an existing building on the heating systems.
Yeah.
But I think we've been learning a lot from you guys as well, because you worked very closely on a church project with us 4 or 5 years ago, where you've been incredibly helpful in looking at solutions and how you can reuse existing buildings, and it's not always straightforward. You can't go in and say, we're putting in underfloor heating and that's going to solve every single problem.
Yeah. No, I bet. People who've been on previous webinars, I'm going to mention discrete heats and thermostats again. I'm not taking backhanders. I'm not on some sort of retainer, but ultimately, I quite like the concept of not having radiators. So have you come across discrete heat? It's skirting board heating, which works with air source heat pump to work with a boiler, obviously, but it's just an alternative to radiators and underfloor heating. But yeah, that does come up now and again. Does anyone else have any more questions? It's been really good session. M&N, can you come off mute and then you can tell us your name firstly, and then you can ask your question.
Hi, it's Matthew. I'm an architect.
Cool.
I work on similar kind of projects where you've got bits of existing buildings and tight budgets often. Just wondering if you find it difficult to propose fees for this kind of project, Darren?
The most difficult question scenario. Yeah, I mean, it's a major challenge on any project, quite frankly, whether it's this type of project, whether it's a church project, whether it's a developer project. I think what we're trying to do on every project where we're quoting fees is be very deliberate about what the deliverables are. And so, we'll be quite upfront about, what we're delivering on the planning application. And then I guess your question really is around the kind of technical element. So we'll be, very upfront about how many hours and what drawings we're doing and what coordination and meetings we might be doing if Mesh are on board. And I think it's just, it is a challenge, and clients have got less money in their pockets to spend on the physical stuff. They've also got less money in their pockets to spend on consultants. So, we've had to just be, really upfront about, okay, well, if that's your budget on the fees, then, these are the things we can do. But it also relies on working with a really, really bloody good builder. And so, for example, on this project here, where I'm just circulating, which is the timber frame cult house that we did in Twyford, we were only retained for planning and technical design, and then on site we introduced a builder, and then the builder literally delivered it without our input. So yeah, it's very challenging. It's difficult to convince a client that you need to pay for an architect for, you know, a complete service, because, like I say, everybody's got less funds in their pocket. What we are trying to do is to recommend builders that we work with and we know that if we're not retained on site, then they will stick to our drawings, and they did on this one. They absolutely stuck to every single drawing and specification. So yeah, it's a challenge, but it's about defining what your deliverables are, I think.
Yeah, great. Thank you.
Cheers, Matthew. Rob has asked, I sort of did touch on this. Do any of the clients on your refurb projects ask for before and after? Sorry, I got something in the way. I can't read that. Before and after proof of energy efficiency improvements, such as HTC testing?
Not many. I mean, I think it'll be interesting to see where we get on the Brockenhurst project, but given that we've done the pre-testing, we've got a client there that's very passionate about the thermal upgrade. So I hope that we'll be able to have a conversation with them about doing that. But again, you know, some of these things come down to, you know, cost and how much money they've got left at the end of the project. I mean, you know, interestingly, on the Brockenhurst one, you know, we've had to make significant reviews and cuts on the project because of how much the client's spending on their kitchen. But it's about priorities that, you know, we have to sort of step back from those things.
Always the kitchen. Just in a couple of, actually it won't be in a couple of weeks, it's in a month or so, Ben Derbyshire, I think he's the chairman of HTA.
Yeah,
sure he was vice president or president of RIBA at some point. He's going to be joining a call, and he's on the board of a software company called Chimney. So they're going to be talking about sort of measurement and providing homeowners with more visibility into the differences, you know, and how they can actually go about, and they can see the proof in the pudding of the work that's been done and know what to ask for. Because at the moment it's very much, like you say, consultancy and architect led in terms of, well, we're going to do X, Y, and Z because it's going to deliver this, but they don't necessarily they don't know what question to ask. So it'd be interesting to hear from them in a few weeks' time, how to create greater education amongst homeowners themselves. Not everyone's like your client in Brockenhurst. I know we did speak about that beforehand in terms of the responsibility, not putting the responsibility on homeowners for retrofit, because, you know, I was saying about how Rufus Granson, when he spoke, it shouldn't be, but his belief is trying to find a retrofit solution at a community level. So it's like coming at it from two completely opposite angles, but which I think you're obviously going to have to do. But the clients that we deal with and you've been dealing with, they are in a position, a reasonably nice position where they've educated themselves and they've got some means to do all of these cool things which are making a difference.
Yeah, I mean, I think you know, we touched on it before we started. I think, you know, our personal view is that our clients are the ones that are dictating what's happening on these projects, and that's fantastic. That actually the clients have moved to a position where they know it's the sort of ethical and morally right thing to do. It's costing them probably a bit more to do it, but then actually maybe in the long term it's not, because, you know, whether it's a private domestic client or a church client, they're all coming to us saying, you know, these are the things we need to do to make our house or our church or our community sustainable, both in, you know, being able to pay your energy bills.
Sure.
It's just a shame that it's not been sort of backed up, you know, any longer by sort of government legislation.
Indeed. Cool. No, I think people have really enjoyed the presentation. You've covered a lot, generated lots of questions. So no, I thank you, Darren, for taking time once again. It's really, really interesting. Last call out for any questions. Otherwise, I will let Darren get back to his day job, designing fantastic homes. Yeah, cool. No, everyone's the same. They've enjoyed the talk, Darren. So no, thanks for your time. Thanks for taking the time to join us today. There's actually a couple of weeks breaks. I'm always reticent to say when I'm flying off somewhere to do something pleasurable and to watch the cricket in India, which I need to offset. But yeah, I've planned it so there aren't any webinars for a couple of weeks, and then we're going to come back, and the next one will be mid-March. So yeah, thanks for everyone for joining. Thanks, Darren, once again, and I'll edit this video and upload it to Meshwork shortly. Cheers, guys.
Thanks.
Bye.